The curator had let his simple question linger in the air as we walked through the rest of the gallery. I avoided the gazes of the portraits, trying to keep my heart from fighting the pulse of the museum. And eventually we came to a door on the far side of the hall. A word was engraved above it. Muscular. After the close and cluttered gallery, the muscular department was jarring. A cavernous room with a high domed ceiling. The layout seemed nearly impossible, as though both the lobby and the coronary gallery bottlenecked directly into a hall larger than the building itself. Crucially adding to the eeriness, the room was completely empty. Devoid of windows, and lit only from recessed lights used sparingly. The curator and I's shadows were the only things decorating the walls. "There's nothing here," I said, not knowing if this was a reason to feel relieved or even more concerned. "Looks to be," the curator said, sounding amused. "But looks can be deceiving." He began walking briskly across the floor, footsteps echoing sharply. "Let's walk and talk, Mr. Singer. It's best to move through muscular quickly." I matched his steps and immediately felt the strain on my heart. "Are you sure we shouldn't slow down? If we get our heart rates too high, I don't know what'll happen." "Heart attack, stroke, all sorts of nasty things," the curator answered drolly. "I've made this walk many, many times, I assure you. I'll keep a healthy pace." This did nothing to calm my nerves, but there wasn't much else to do besides trust the curator, at least for the time being. Now would be a great time to start explaining what the hell's going on here. I stopped in my tracks. I was so sick of such useless phrases, such non-answers. To be quite honest, I was just the wrong mixture of scared and pissed off. "I'm sorry. That's not good enough. I want to know what's going on here now." I realize I'm not an especially threatening guy, but I was still surprised when the curator's stride didn't break. Not in the least. "Keep moving, Mr. Singer. It's for the best." His voice drifted back to me. I had had enough. We hadn't gone very far. Surely I could remember the path back into the bizarre coronary gallery. Out of the lobby, squeeze myself back between the hat and the ice cream parlor until I was back into the familiar Habitsville I knew. I was done with mystery and cryptic conversations. It was time to go home. I turned my heels to head back from where we came, and sharp pain blossomed from my nose. There was nothing before me but red, and as I blinked, I saw, inexplicably, blood smeared on a rust-colored brick wall that seemed to have sprung up out of nowhere. It stretched above 10 feet horizontally, blocked my view of the exit, but otherwise seemed to not have a function. It absolutely had not been there only a moment ago. My one hand cupped to catch the free-flowing blood as it dribbled down my chin. The other reached out and grazed my fingertips against the rough surface of the wall. There was no question. It was real. I could feel the grittiness of the stone as my blood cooled on its surface. "How?" I called to the curator, but as I turned to look ahead to where I could still hear the footsteps of my guide, dread coursed through me. Inches from my face, where before had been an empty hall, was instead a brick wall. Well, part of a brick wall. Impossible as it seemed, the wall appeared to be half done. I could see the binding was still wet, and it only went to my chest instead of over my head as the other one had, as though the crafter had been caught in the act, construction interrupted. "What the hell?" I said, my speech garbled from the blood still flowing from my nostrils. "Keep moving, Mr. Singer," the voice of the curator floating by, almost singing, from much farther than it had been before. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the smallest flint of movement. I turned my head, and there was a new wall joining the first two, creating a narrow space of only about 2 feet. And in that moment, the mechanisms of this place was clear. Keep moving, or get entombed. I bunched up my shirt by the collar and pinched my nostrils with it. A quick glance to my right told me that another wall had risen up, so the only way to move was forward. I kept my eyes wide open, afraid to blink, and hoisted myself onto the top of the wall. Ironically, I overestimated my own strength and lost my balance, falling from about 10 feet onto the hard marble floor. The blood from my nose spattered across the floor, and for a moment, I thought I had done far worse than a simple broke nose. Blood pooled in front of me on the floor, and my head spun. I could make out the reflection on its smooth surface. No, I garbled. The walls had spread like a virus across the room, each in varying stages of construction. I got to my feet as quickly as I could, my eyes roved over them quickly. It seemed that so long as I kept them locked in my gaze, they were unable to grow. I limped forward, my body sore from the fall. I was able to move around the wall directly in front of me. I was dizzy. Must have hit my head on the floor, and I lurched forward, bracing myself on the large chunk of brick in front of me, fighting to keep my eyes from clenching against the pounding in my head. I had to keep moving forward. I knew this by now, but neither of my injuries nor my urgency could keep me from noticing one terrible fact. This was not a brick. I let out an involuntary, disgusted groan as I drew my hand away sharply. It came away wet. I abandoned my watching of the surrounding walls to examine what I had just incidentally grasped. There, speckled with caulk and squeezed in the center of 4 surrounding stone bricks, was a completely rectangular human head. It had clearly been round at one point, severed at the neck, and molded to fit the space. It had been dead for some time, though, not long enough to lose its flesh. My index finger had perforated its solid cheek, now paper-thin with time, the half-moon eyes yellowed and rotten. It hadn't been done artfully. It didn't even feel meant to scare. Organic bricks made by something that saw flesh as material. Some involuntary instinct within me kept me from getting sick. Survival was my priority, though. I wanted to look away. I kept my eyes roving over the walls as I moved, making eye contact with a large number of head bricks that were shoved amongst the real ones. Looking deeply into the sockets of the ones that already faded to bone. "Where are you?" I called out desperately, becoming disoriented as walls behind walls cropped up. "Keep moving, Mr. Singer," the curator answered to my right. I'd gotten turned around after all. He sounded despicably placid, his calmness infuriating. "Keep talking," I responded. The curator obliged, opting instead for a steady hum of a dissonant melody I didn't recognize. I followed the haunting sound of his tenor, rounding corners and praying that I would have enough space to move forward through the labyrinth. Every time I blinked, it seemed more bricks were added, both flesh and otherwise. The curator was close, so close it seemed as though only one more set of walls separated us. I turned what I hoped was the final corner. A dead end. My stomach dropped. "Wait," I said aloud, but it was futile. By the time I turned, my route back was walled up. I breathed as deeply as I could through my mouth, the air tasting of rust from the blood of my crusted nose. Nonetheless, my heart was hammering, fighting against the rhythm of the museum. I looked to the top of the wall. It was far too tall to make it over, and to my horror, bricks had appeared over top of me, slowly creating a ceiling. I was going to be sealed inside. I started tracing my fingers against the grout of the brick in front of me. The beams from the overhead lights were narrowing as brick upon brick spread above me. I could hear the grinding sound of them being placed, but as I looked up, I could never see the builder. I was clawing at the space between the 2 bricks as the final gap was closed. The curator, still humming his haunting melody, sounded submerged in water. My nails were chipping against the stone, not finding any give and beginning to panic. Then my fingers found something soft. I pressed against it and found the rubbery sensation of buoyant flesh. The sick feeling growing in my stomach. I was thankful there was no light to see what I had to do next. I tried to shove my sore fingers in the grooves between the head and the bricks around it, but it was sealed tight. There would be no gentle shimmying the block out. I reared my fist back and let it hit. It hurt more than I thought that it would. I didn't feel any movement. I took a deep breath, backed up as best I could until my back pressed against the wall behind me. Then I kicked. It helped to picture a jack-o'-lantern. The way I would stomp out the rotting ones as a kid once Halloween had passed. Squelching the guts of a vegetable, and the hard bits hitting the floor just seeds. Merely a pumpkin, and nothing more. Eventually, with a sound of suction and a pop, light filtered back into the confined space that I was trapped in. The curator's humming sounded clear. I continued to knock the bricks surrounding the hole, trying not to see the bits of materials dangling from my shoes. With loud echoing cracks, the bricks fell away, and I could climb through the hole. I breathed heavily, chest aching. The curator stood by another door idly, looking mildly entertained, but otherwise unbothered. His humming had stopped. He glanced down at my feet. He made a sound with his teeth. I looked down too, against my best interests. It immediately diverted my eyes from the pulpy mass that once was a human head. A relatively fresh one, by the looks of it, which made everything so much worse. Poor Humphrey, the curator said, disappointed. Then he stepped swiftly through the door that read, respiratory. And I, not knowing better than to drag behind, followed suit. I want to remind you guys that I also do narrations over at Chilling. The Chilling app is available for Android, iPhone, and if you'd like to get your hands on the Chilling app and hear myself as well as many, many other narrators, and they have a whole new setup where you can watch movies on there now, and it's also free to try out with ads now, so you don't have to get a subscription like you used to before. You can actually just get the app, you can start watching on your PC. It's evolved so much since the last time I have updated you guys on this, and sincerely, it's a great place if you want to see more horror, especially if you like horror audio. So strongly suggest you check out the Chilling app. And finally, I want to give a huge thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. So I want to give a very special thank you to Jordan Humble, Diana Kraus, Disciple, Strategy Wolf Emoji, SullyMan, Brandon Mendoza, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, William Wellington, Scruffy the Janitor, Brenna, LaQueda Canizales, Smiley the Psychotic, Djenna, Dante Kinkade, SimbasBloodyMojo, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, M, Jesus Cornejo, Yarghoul, VerbalHorror, Amber Clark, J. Kearns, Mike, himbojerry, CrusaderChocobo, Corbin Dallas, Estabine, Seclude, Salty Surprise, Red Shadowcat, Turtleman, Cryolinian, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Dirt Diver 030, Voice of Sand, Psychomel, Melted Lake, Tali Sue, William King, Sashi Suzaku, Croconut 509, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Hades Nephew, Acid System, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. I really appreciate your support, and I cannot thank you enough. I wish you all the best. Sweet dreams.